So yesterday I did a story about the impending crisis that is Donald Trump's internet censorship executive order draft. Some of the details have leaked, and we are learning more and more about the horrors of that executive order. And fortunately, and I'm actually glad to see this story is getting more and more attention. A lot of people reacting to my clip, more than 110,000 views in the first 12 hours. I got dozens of emails, more than 2,000 comments on that video. And even beyond that, I'm thrilled to see that this story is getting pickup because it's not like the sexiest, most salacious story. It's not necessarily the story that would get the most attention, but it is an authoritarian nightmare and people are noticing. And put simply, this is how the authoritarians start to use the law to control speech and to enforce speech. And you might remember, I was actually thinking this morning as I was reading about the reaction to this executive order proposal. Canadian intellectual Jordan Peterson rose to prominence for what he claimed was his protest of possible compelled speech by the Canadian government. He should be right here protesting what Donald Trump is doing because Donald Trump's drafted executive order would compel social media networks to have to allow speech that the Trump administration determines is so-called political speech, and specifically conservative political speech, to fight back against what they claim is some kind of extreme liberal bias in social networks and on platforms. Donald Trump believes that social media platforms are in a biased way suppressing and blocking conservative speech. The basis for this is a fantasy, but it doesn't change that this is extremely dangerous. It is overwhelmingly authoritarian. The White House shouldn't have the power to select and choose what content has to be allowed on social media platforms. It is stunning that people like me, social left libertarians, end up defending the rights of corporations against the oppressive authoritarian takeover of speech that Donald Trump wants to do. So let me do my impression now of a center-right libertarian. Social networks are private companies. They have to follow non-discrimination law. Twitter can't say no whites allowed on our platform. YouTube can't say no Jews allowed to upload videos or whatever. There is already established law that prevents that. Twitter can say, we don't allow the N-word. We don't allow bullying trans people by deliberately misgendering them over and over and over again or whatever. This is all legal content, strictly speaking, which a private corporation can choose to allow or not to allow based on their business priorities, their social priorities, or for whatever reason they want, as long as it does not violate existing anti-discrimination laws. This doesn't mean I like it. This doesn't mean they always make the decisions I would make. This doesn't mean that it couldn't conceivably cause me problems, the likes of which we've been having on YouTube. But we can't be hypocrites. What Trump wants to do is to give the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, power to go after platforms that the White House believes are suppressing content on the basis of political orientation on their platforms. And the scariest part is that it's believed that there will be penalties for this against the platforms. What those penalties will be, we don't yet know. How far does this go? Do YouTube channels with 1 million subscribers become subject to similar restrictions in a year when the David Pakman Show YouTube channel hits 1 million subscribers if things continue the way they're going? Can the government say this channel is suppressing certain political opinions of the right? Can we be fined? Can you suffer penalties? And I avoid slippery slope arguments in most cases because they don't make sense. This is one of those cases where we really need to think of the slippery slope. Who counts as a possible regulatee of this executive order? When do we go from regulating platforms to regulating individual shows? This is the biggest attack on a free press since sort of all the other attacks we've seen under Donald Trump, but this is a really big one. If you care about a free press, I don't care if you're left or right, you must oppose this. This is the exact type of heavy-handed media regulation that we see under real bona fide authoritarians in dictatorships, on a spectrum, right? Going from actual dictatorships to just countries with leaders that are authoritarian to the extreme, China, North Korea, Venezuela, Russia, whichever version or flavor of authoritarianism you want to pick out. It's actually difficult to put into words how dangerous this is. If this happens, we become a country where the government can do mass censorship on the basis of political orientation or of whatever it wants. It lets the party in power decide which speech is allowed on the internet, which speech must be allowed on the internet on specific platforms. And this is extraordinarily dangerous. Now, I'm going to keep talking about this because it has to be stopped. And ultimately, it may be a court that decides whether the eventual version of the executive order that is signed by Trump is legal. But that means that we have to change who's choosing the judges because it's Donald Trump right now. Increasingly, this is a justice system, a judiciary controlled by Donald Trump more and more. 2 Supreme Court justices, 25% of appellate and superior court judges. This is not about whether you like or dislike Trump. We know how Trump will use this, but Trump will be gone in 2 or 6 years. Do Republicans want a future Democratic president telling the FTC what speech is allowed on the internet? This is straight out of the authoritarian dictator's playbook. It has to be stopped. I'm glad it's getting attention, and we're going to continue talking about it.